Guys, so we're going to have a look at Out of the Blue by Simon Armitage. I know we've had a look at this in class, but this is a bit of a chance to get a more detailed analysis of it. So before we start, make sure you've got your anthology or a copy of the poem with you. You're also going to need a pen or a few pencils, maybe in different colours, so that you can make notes on the different aspects of the poem. As you go, if you've got any questions, just jot them down, pause the video if you need to, and make sure you've also had a listen to the poem. Sometimes you pick things up when you listen to them being read rather than just reading them. There's really good ones to look at on YouTube, so you might want to pause now and just go and have a quick listen to it. We'll be using the acronym P.O.L.E to look at the poem. That's purpose, all about what the story is that's being told and why it's being written, so if there's any messages that the poet's trying to give. We'll have a look at organisation, so how it's all structured, the stanzas, line length, punctuation, enjambment, so any missing punctuation at the ends of lines, and how it looks on the page, that's called graphology. We'll also look at the language, so the way the poet uses words, uses language techniques to make effects, and the emotions of the author and the emotions of you as well. Okay, so first of all, looking at purpose, Simon Armitage is telling the story of a worker in the World Trade Center during 9/11. He does this to give you like an alternative viewpoint, so rather than watching a distant shot of a building burning, we are guided through the experience of someone actually inside the building. He also shows two conflicts, so we know we're looking at conflict anyway. That's the title of the cluster of poems, so this is a really important point. He's looking at the conflicts between America and Al-Qaeda, and then he's also looking at the internal conflict of someone who's trapped, who's worrying about how to get out, if they're going to get out, and if not, how they're going to die. So it's that conflict of whether they can survive or whether they've just got to give in. So on to organisation. This is the nitty-gritty of how the poem is constructed. The poem has 7 regular stanzas, so all of the stanzas have the same amount of lines. Also, the first 6 have the same rhyme scheme, with lines 2 and 4 rhyming. You might have your own ideas for why Armitage has done this, but I think he's trying to create a slow, controlled rhythm for the speaker, reflecting his efforts to stay calm. You might have spotted that the last stanza doesn't follow the same rhyme scheme. Instead, it's in rhyming couplets, so lines 1 and 2 rhyme, and then so do 3 and 4. This then seems to show how the speaker gives up at the end and loses that control he's been trying to keep through the rest of the poem. This idea of trying to maintain control could also be shown through the line length. You can see that the line lengths are all different, and this is another clue to that internal conflict that is bothering the man. So on the outside it's really regular, with all those 4 length stanzas, but then inside, with those long and then short lines, he's actually panicking and quite worried about what's going to happen. Next, something you might or might not have come across before is the poet's use of enjambment. So this is when a poet doesn't punctuate the end of a line, but instead he lets it slip over to the next. We can see this is in almost all of the stanzas. For example, take a look in the 3rd stanza, where it says, "Do you think you are watching, a man shaking crumbs or pegging out washing?" It would be more natural to break the line at the comma, but Armitage doesn't do that. When seeing enjambment, it makes me think of a lack of structure, so this links closely to the lack of structure in the Falling Towers. Or it could also show the fractured thought process of the speaker. If you can think of anything else that it might reflect, jot that down, because that would be a really great extra interpretation of the poem. On to language. This should make up the bulk of your writing and notes, and is to do with any way the writer uses words. Something to start with is the narrative voice. So here we have a first-person speaker who appeals to the audience and talks directly to all the listeners. This could be to evoke memories for 9/11, or maybe make us feel more sympathetic and involved with the life of the speaker. Next, we can see personification in the poem. Armitage personified the fire when he says bullying fire. For me, this is if he is taking the focus away from the act of terrorism, which most people were focusing on when watching the news or talking about this tragedy. Instead, He wants you to think about the threats the speaker is immediately facing, so the heat and smoke from the fire. There's also a lot of repetition in the poem. Make sure you find examples of this and highlight it on either your anthology or a copy of the poem. I think it's really effective for recreating the nervousness and anxiety through almost creating a stutter for the speaker. Another technique is the inclusion of questions. Things like, does anyone see a soul worth saving? When will you come? These all build up and create a sense of urgency and desperation. And then if you have a little look in the last stanza, there's a question without a question mark. Do you see me, my love? It's again showing that change in attitude here. So at the end he's given up and he doesn't expect any response, so it's not really a question. Finally, a couple of things you can always look for in a poem, especially when it comes to analysing unseen poems, and you might forget some of the techniques, like metaphors, simile, personification. You can just look for contrasts and interesting words. So in Out of the Blue, you get the contrast between the everyday and the extraordinary. Go through and highlight any examples of this that you can find. There's also loads of interesting words that can be picked out and explored. I've listed a few of those for you if you have a look on the video, and I'd like you to think about what impressions they give you and what they make you think about. So make notes about these and bring those to class with you too. Okay, so your last section is emotions. This is quite an easy one for this poem. As I've already mentioned, the speaker goes from fairly hopeful and positive to resigned and hopeless. I'd like you to try and find some quotes to support that idea and see if you can find the turning point in his emotions. I'd also like you to make a few notes about how the poem makes you feel and why. The why is the most important part, so I don't want any one of you just saying it makes me feel sad or it makes me feel upset. Explain why it makes you feel that way. Here's a few key words that you should have got down while making your notes. If you've not got these down anywhere, I want you to just read through them and see if you can link them to the poem somewhere. They're all really, really key, so it shouldn't be too difficult. Don't forget there's some other really great sites for building up your notes and your understanding of these poems. So if you're still struggling with it or you want to do a little bit more research, I've provided a couple of links for you in the summary box. So feel free to browse those when you have a chance. And lastly, here's a copy of the poem. I've just picked out all the important quotes that I think you could write quite a bit about. So if you've not made notes on these things that are highlighted in red, I'd like you to just go back through your poem, underline them or highlight them, and see what you can explain about them. So things like you should have already got relate to directly addressing the listeners. So work your way through and see what you can come up with. If you're stuck with any of them, again, that's something you can jot down, ready to ask me in class next week. Alright, so well done with all your notes, and I'll see you soon.